There can be no quibbling about the immensity of his love, how deeply and earnestly and supernaturally he desires to save us if we only ask him for that. St. Mary of Egypt went on to become an amazing saint, and she is a saint that we desperately need. This world of ours is drowning in pornographic literature. How many thousands upon thousands and tens and hundreds of thousands are victims of this? The world itself, in a very general sense, has become pornographic. St. Mary is a saint to whom we should pay very close attention. So, beloved, do not despair. Don't let the enemy convince you that you should give up, that your sins can't be forgiven. It's a lie. It's just a lie. So come. Come and receive what God intends you to have. His mercy, His love, His grace, His light, joy. All good things in Him. It's all ours for the asking.
Rain in the Desert. Father Apostolos Hill is Dean of Holy Trinity Greek Orthodox Cathedral in Phoenix, Arizona. This has been a listener-supported presentation of Ancient Faith Radio. On the web at ancientfaith.com.
Linking the ancient Christian faith with modern technology. You're listening to internet-based Ancient Faith Radio.
It's time now for Stewardship Calling with your host, Bill Marianis. Bill is a stewardship evangelist whose Stewardship Calling ministry is focused on helping people, parishes, and Christian organizations discover and live their stewardship callings and embrace true stewardship and generosity so that they may have a good account before the awesome judgment seat of Christ. Here's Bill.
Welcome to part 2 of the Effective Parish Assessment program, where we're exploring the 6 pillars and 30 building blocks of the most effective and healthy Christian parishes. Now, if you missed part 1, no worries. It's been recorded and it has been released as a podcast. Now, if you're listening to this program live, keep listening and then go back and listen to part 1. But if by chance you're listening to this as a podcast, then stop listening now, go listen to the July 31st part 1 where we lay the foundation, and then come back and finish part 2. Now you can find part 1 is already up and loaded, and part 2 will be shortly after this live program, but they're eventually going to be all on stewardshipcalling.com, and you can go to the Internet Radio tab, and you'll see Ancient Faith Radio, and you just scroll down to the date, which in this case is July 31st was part 1, August 3rd is part 2. Or, if you're more comfortable, you can access this via the Ancient Faith Radio pages, and you go to the Stewardship Calling subpages, and again, look for the programs from July 31st and August 3rd. Now, in part 1 that aired on July 31st, we covered in detail the first 3 pillars and 15 building blocks of an effective church. And those pillars were first, vision and planning, second, leadership and teams, and third, stewardship and generosity. And you'll want to hear our discussion of those critical 3 pillars and the 15 building blocks that support them so that you can get a picture of the entire Effective Parish Assessment tool and how it all works and fits together to help you understand better what's going on in your parish. But tonight, I'm not going to be repeating all of the background information that sets the stage for what we're talking about that I discuss in part 1. Tonight, we're going to complete the explanation of the Orthodox Ministry Services Effective Parish Model by addressing the remaining 3 essential pillars of an effective church and the 15 building blocks that support those 3 pillars. So tonight, specifically, we're going to be exploring the pillars of parishioner engagement, ministries, and operational effectiveness. Stay tuned. So we've got to begin by acknowledging that our Orthodox churches and parishes are suffering and have been suffering for many, many, many years And after the over 75 years of combined experience by the members of the Orthodox Ministries Services parish team that you're going to hear from tonight, where we were able to review all of the empirical data within the landscape of the Orthodox Christian churches in America, what I call the American orthosphere, we were also able to look at a lot of reliable church resources and information that ultimately resulted in the development of the OMS Effective Parish model. And we're reminded again, as we said at the outset, that Holy Scripture teaches us the importance of continually assessing where we are on our faith journeys. And again, I cite to 2 Corinthians 13:5, where we're admonished to, quote, examine yourselves to see whether you are in the faith. Test yourselves. Or do you not realize this about yourselves, that Jesus Christ is in you, unless indeed you fail to meet the test, end quote. And Acts 14:15 goes further by asking men, why are you doing these things? And then in Romans 12:2, we hear, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. And that's the critical work that we are continuing tonight in part 2 of the Effective Parish Assessment. Welcome, brothers and sisters, to Stewardship Calling in the first Wednesday series on Ancient Faith Radio. This is Bill Marianis from stewardshipcalling.com and Orthodox Ministry Services, coming to you live from the shores of beautiful Lake Lanier in Gainesville, Georgia, that's just a little bit north of Atlanta. Now, those of you that have listened to this program before know that it's based on a simple premise that I could believe firmly that you have been called by your Creator to a personal calling, something, a reason, some cause, but a purpose that you need to do with all of the gifts over which God gave you. And that's why we call it your stewardship calling. And St. Paul makes it crystal clear that we all have that calling in multiple letters that he wrote to the Ephesians and others. But the favorite one I cite all the time is Ephesians 4:1, where he clearly states that he begs us to lead a life worthy of the calling to which we've been called. And until 2017, by day, I was blessed to be a partner in 2 great international law firms of over 1,100 lawyers each, where I served in management and as managing partner of our Atlanta office and did a lot of work in corporate mergers and acquisitions. But my why, my personal calling, that which I was called to do with whatever few gifts God gave me, is to be a stewardship calling evangelist. My focus is on helping people in parishes and Orthodox ministry organizations to live their stewardship callings so that we may all have a good account before the awesome judgment seat of Christ. And this program and a lot of other helpful tools and information is on effective churches and stewardship and church strategic planning can be found at my always free website, stewardshipcalling.com. And you can reach me at bill@stewardshipcalling.com. But we're going to talk tonight about another incredible resource that I'm going to point you to, effectiveparish.org. But for all our listeners tonight, we welcome your calls and questions. You can call in at 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346. Now, in part 1, we explored in a lot more detail the degree to which our churches are all suffering of multiple root cause issues that actually come from comorbidities, some of which have been lasting for a while. And I don't want to repeat everything, but I'm going to remind you and everybody of the 6 most salient pieces of pre-COVID empirical data that should light your hair on fire. These are all facts. I'm giving you the sources on them, and this is not the good news, but this is what's motivated us to do what we're doing. Fact number 1, 47% of adults who were raised in the Orthodox Christian Church have left it, according to the Pew Research Center. Fact number 2, 64% of young adults with a Christian background drop out of the church during their 20s, according to the Barna Research Group. Fact number 3, around 39% of millennials, those that were born between 1981 and 1996, are now nuns, N-O-N-E-S, not the ladies with the black hats, but people that no longer claim any religious affiliation, according to the well-respected Public Religion Research Institute. Fact number 4, within the American Orthodox churches, on average, only 26% of Orthodox parishioners regularly attend church on Sundays. And this according to a pre-COVID study that was sponsored by the Assembly of Canonical Orthodox Bishops. Fact number 5, when parishioners were asked, quote, other than during the homily, what percentage of the time during the divine liturgy is your mind wandering? A statistically significant sampling of Orthodox parishioners who actually attend church admitted that they were distracted about 75% of the time during the Divine Liturgy. And fact number 6, 99% of our parishes rely on the total generosity of strangers in the form of food festivals or hall rentals or other pseudo-business activities just to keep the churches open and their operations funded. So, bottom line, we've lost half of our cradle Orthodox adults. We're losing 60% of our youth when they leave our homes. Of all the cradle Orthodox we kept, plus all the converts we recruited, only about 1 in 4 are regularly attending church on Sunday. And when they're there, they're not really there because their minds are wandering 75% of the time. And finally, without the generosity of total strangers, the vast majority of our churches could not remain open and funded at their current levels. Now this is just some of the extraordinary amount of evidence of the crisis that we're facing in the American orthosphere. And what we're hoping to do with the Effective Parish Assessment process is to give our parishes finally the tools that they need to awaken the faithful, to fight for Christ's church again, just as the early Christians did, as we reported in J. Warner Wallace's book, Lessons for Today's Church from the Life of the Early Church, when he said, and I quote, "The early Christians didn't attend church, they were the church. An active, engaged body of believers equipped to change the world. The first Christians were revolutionaries. The group they formed was, in many ways, very different from the church we know today," end quote. Now, I submit that given all of the headwinds we're facing, it's time to be revolutionaries again. Regardless of your jurisdiction, regardless of your geography, regardless of your ethnic background, your age, or your education, I'm saying, my brothers and sisters, it is time to become unapologetic revolutionaries for Christ and what he taught. Unafraid to stand up and say, we are followers of Jesus Christ, and willing to take all the slings and arrows and criticism that the evil one is going to cause to come our way. We need to stop being people going occasionally to church and not paying attention or sharing our faith beyond the 4 parish walls, but instead, we're urging you to consider to become people who are the very personification of Christ's church, 24/7 by 365. Because make no mistake about it, we own all of the above challenges, problems, and bad data, and many more. I mean, as a result, it's up to us to fix them. Now, those of you who listen to my programs before have known I often quote the father of the quality movement, W. Edwards Deming, when he said, and I quote, "Anytime the majority of people behave a particular way the majority of the time, the people are not the problem. The problem is inherent in the system. And as a leader, you own the responsibility for the system. Although a particular person can be a big problem, if you find yourself blaming the people, you should look again," end quote. And this is what we're doing. This is what we're urging all the parishes, all the faithful, all the Christians, all of the parishioners, all of the church leaders, the clergy, the hierarchs, everybody to do. Let us look again. Because what the OMS team did was combine our over 75 years of active work in Christian churches in the Orthodox mission field, of acquiring data and dealing with some of the unique and some of the non-unique issues that are faced by Christ's churches. And when we reviewed and compared all of the substantial research that we were able to compile, we also vetted it against some of the research and incredible work by best-in-class research organizations, groups like the Pew Research Center, the Gallup Organization, the Barna Research, the Public Religion Research Institute, the National Study of Youth and Religion, the Science of Generosity Studies, and a lot more. See, our goal was to objectively discern the best empirical data and provable truths that are applicable to the Orthodox Christian churches in America, and to identify the root causes of the operational issues that our Orthodox parishes are facing. And then, from that incredible foundational data, build validated models of inquiry to be able to assess the parishes. Now, in the critical work that we undertook, the OMS, the 4 amigos, as I refer to us, of Owen, Tibbs, Chakos, and Marianus, that you're going to hear from tonight, we were joined on this journey by the amazing Dr. Scott Mondor, another Orthodox Christian who brings with him decades of empirical research skills that he is now using for Christ Church by helping to create the most useful and reliable parish tools. And we were blessed to have the talented Louis Lambrou of Lambrou Marketing on our team to help us set up the Effective Parish Assessment website that we're going to talk about tonight. But from all of the work that we have been doing now for a long time was born the Effective Parish Assessment that analyzes what, as it turns out, are the 6 pillars and 30 building blocks that a successful parish must optimize to excellence in order to be the most healthy and effective it can be. And Orthodox Ministry Services is committed to eventually making these essential EPA assessment tools and processes available for free to all Orthodox parishes to help all of Christ's church become force multipliers of Christianity here in our Jerusalem of America. And we're going to be offering all of this through our special OMS website, I hate when I do that because it's just so old-fashioned, right? But it's effectiveparish.org. That's effectiveparish.org. The effectiveparish.org website homepage actually provides you a high-level description of the Effective Parish Assessment. And the second page of effectiveparish.org is devoted to the Orthodox Effective Parish Assessment. This is the page that all Orthodox parishes, regardless of jurisdiction, can read about what the EPA entails once we're able to make it available. And if you're interested, there's even a form where you can submit your parish information for us to make available this process to you. Or you can email us at info@effectiveparish.org. That's info@effectiveparish.org. Because eventually, and even now, effectiveparish.org is going to be your gateway to learn more about the 6 pillars and the Effective Parish Assessment 1 that measures those 6 pillars, and the 30 building blocks and the Effective Parish Assessment 2 that measures your parish in those 30 building blocks. And more importantly, once we finally release the EPA on the special new platform that we're designing for its mass availability, if you register, we'll let you know when you can access both the EPA 1 and EPA 2 for free from effectiveparish.org. Now, these tools are not yet released for public use because we're finalizing a special new delivery platform for mass access. And that's why we're asking for parishes to register so that we can notify you when it's available. And I don't want anybody to worry. OMS will absolutely and unequivocally not use your email for anything except to communicate with you about the Effective Parish Assessment process, because we're doing this work to freely help you for God's greater glory and not for the pay, practice, or praise. Now, there's a third page on the effectiveparish.org website called GOA EPAP. Due to the generosity of Leadership 100 and with the support of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese, OMS is able to actually go a little bit further for a few selected cohort GOA parishes. Now, through this special Leadership 100 program, OMS is established this Effective Parish Assessment program for these selected GOA cohort parishes that will include the EPA 1 assessment of the 6 pillars, the EPA 2 assessment of the 30 building blocks, but it also adds an invaluable preliminary parish improvement plan, what we call a PPIP. Don't you love all these acronyms, right? But the PPIP is actually a roadmap that starts with the results of the EPA assessments in a color-coded red, yellow, green presentation format, where green means the parish is in good shape on that element, or yellow means the parish needs to be cautious in a particular area, and where the red means red alert, parish needs to devote significant urgent attention to that pillar or that building block. And in addition to the PPIP, the GOA cohort parishes that are chosen to participate in the special Leadership 100 program will also receive several consultative sessions with some of the true subject matter experts at OMS that you're going to hear from tonight and that were featured in the first program. Because this is such an extra effort with the current level of support from Leadership 100 and the GOA, OMS is currently only able to offer this more comprehensive program to approximately 15 to 20 GOA parishes that meet certain selection criteria. So if you are a GOA innovator or early adopter with experienced clergy and lay leadership that's committed to this kind of helpful self-assessment and evaluation, then you could go to the third page, the GOA EPAP page, and you can sign up and let us know that you want to be considered for this program. Or you can email us at cohortparish@effectiveparish.org. And again, I went through this quickly. You can listen to this again, or you can just go to effectiveparish.org, and it's pretty straightforward. It's very clear. So OMS is planning to release the Effective Parish Assessment to everyone after we complete the final development and testing of the new mass delivery platform that we've designed specifically for this. And assuming everything goes well in the testing, our goal is to be able to release the EPA sometime after the beginning of the new ecclesiastical year in September. And during the month of August, we're going to be working closely to interview and select the at least 18 GOA cohort parishes to participate in that special Leadership 100 program. But once everybody is selected in the GOA program, we'll let you know because we'll have the information. And once we can make the program available to everybody, when you register with us and send us your email, we will be able to let you know that it's up and it's available for your use and for the information. Now, before I take a short break as we start to explore the last three pillars of the effective parish model and the 15 building blocks that support them, I want to briefly again introduce my Orthodox Ministry Services colleagues, Mitch Owen, Steve Tibbs, and Nick Chakos. So let's start with Dr. Mitch Owen. In addition to Mitch's work with Orthodox Ministry Services, he's the founder and chief operating officer of Mitchin Incorporated, which is a innovative training and organizational development company. Mitch also previously served as the Deputy Director for Performance and Organization Development with the North Carolina Department of Public Safety and as the Director of Personal and Organizational Development at North Carolina State in Raleigh, North Carolina. Mitch is the creator of the elusive leadership model for high-performance teams, and if you listen to part one and you listen to his description of our leadership in teams pillar and the modules that support that, you are understanding a lot of what's included in this kind of notion of the elusive leadership model. He also does an enormous amount of work with colleges and universities and other nonprofits, including Orthodox churches, on what he calls strategic positioning, kind of his version of strategic planning. And he serves as an executive coach for well over 25 executives, doctors, clergy, nurses, public health professionals, chief cooks, and bottle washers. Mitch was one of the leaders of the Metropolis of Atlanta strategic plan that I was blessed to work on, and he developed a servant leadership program as a part of that, as well as a parish strategic planning process. Mitch earned his Bachelor's of Science and Master's degrees from Clemson University and completed his Doctorate of Education at North Carolina State University in Adult Education and Development, focusing on technology adoption and psychology. What a mix. Mitch is also currently serves as a member of the Metropolis Council of the Greek Orthodox Metropolis of Atlanta. Our second colleague is Steve Tibbs. So we're going to go from the farthest end of the East Coast to the farthest end of the West Coast. Steve led the implementation of the strategic plan for the metropolis of San Francisco. And in addition to his work with Orthodox Ministry Services, Steve is the CEO of an organizational consultancy that he actually founded in 2003. But prior to that, Steve was the global practice leader for Lee Hecht Harrison's leadership consulting practice. And before that, he was a partner in Heydrich and Struggle's leadership consulting practice, specializing in executive coaching and assessment. And again, you heard some of the great insights that Steve had from his professional experiences that have now been adapted into the orthosphere in the Part 1 program that I hope you'll listen to. Steve was also with Accenture for nearly 10 years, where he was a partner in their human performance and change management practice, and also served as the global managing partner for their enterprise portal practice. And while Steve was there at Accenture, he did a lot of work on workforce transformation and transitions, including large-scale outsourcing deals. So when we start to think about the transformations that we need to bring about in our parishes, this whole team has had experience actually doing that in the real world. Steve has a bachelor's degree in health education from California State University, Long Beach, and a master's degree in human resource management from the University of Redlands. Our third OMS colleague that you're going to hear from tonight is Nick Chakos. And Nick's an experienced nonprofit leader that's currently serving as the CEO of Orthodox Ministry Services. But previously, he served as the executive director of Focus North America and as director of development and U.S. program office director of IOCC, where he served for 13 years. He's also the co-founder of a healthcare analytics company, Primer. Nick's an adjunct professor of organizational development and leadership at the University of Pittsburgh Graduate School, and he's trained over 250 nonprofit organizations in leadership development, fundraising, organizational infrastructure, and strategic planning. Nick's also a graduate of the Lilly School of Philanthropy at Indiana University, in addition to holding a BA from Washington Jefferson College and a Master's of Nonprofit Administration from the University of Notre Dame. Now, finally, I mean, that's just me, and y'all, if you're a regular listener to this program, know that I'm just a recovering simple country lawyer who spent about 36 years as a partner in leadership in 2 global law firms. But that was before the Lord called me not to retire early, but instead to refire and work full-time for free in my Stewardship Calling and OMS ministries. A million years ago, I was blessed to earn a BA in psychology from Northwestern, an MBA from Emory University Gozueta School of Business, a Juris Doctorate from Emory University School of Law, and I'm currently working on a doctorate in strategic leadership with a concentration in servant leadership at Regent University. So that's a short introduction to the OMS church team, and the team that for this 2-part program was responsible for the development of the Effective Parish Assessment, including all of the analysis that went into discovering and researching and identifying the 30 building blocks of operational effectiveness in the healthiest and most effective parishes that combine themselves into the 6 pillars of the most healthy and effective parishes. So we're going to take a short break right now. When I come back, my colleagues and I will begin to explore the Orthodox Ministry Services Effective Parish Assessment Program, parts 4, 5, and 6. We'll take a short break and we'll be right back.
Bill will be right back, but the lines are open if you want to ask a question or offer your thoughts. The number is 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO.
We talk about prayer, fasting, and almsgiving as the 3 spiritual pillars of the Orthodox faith. But the sad truth is that while we spend a lot of time in the church talking about prayer and fasting, we devote relatively little time to talking about almsgiving.
Money. What does that have to do with the gospel? The Orthodox Christian Leadership Initiative is pleased to announce the 6th annual Orthodox Advanced Leadership Conference, and this year's theme is Money. The gospel changes everything. Parish leaders and emerging leaders among the clergy and laity who serve the local parish, diocese, or Orthodox nonprofits are encouraged to attend either in person or online. You can learn more information about this September 16 to 18 conference by going to orthodoxservantleaders.com. That's orthodoxservantleaders.com.
We have to choose to recover the basic foundational understanding of the place of money and salvation.
This has been a public service announcement of Ancient Faith Radio.
Stewardship Calling is back, and we are ready for your call at 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO. Here again is Bill Marianis.
So welcome back to Stewardship Calling and our first Wednesday program where we're discussing the Effective Parish Assessment Program and how your parish could receive a valuable and free service with my colleagues at Orthodox Ministry Services. Remember, again, we would welcome your calls and questions at 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346. Now, before we get started with the 4th pillar of operational excellence, please remember, we encourage you after this program to check out effectiveparish.org. And if you're an Orthodox parish with clergy and lay leadership committed to operational excellence and interested in being able to receive the benefit of this free Effective Parish Assessment Program, you can register at info@effectiveparish.org, or you can register right on the Orthodox EPA site. If you're one of the GOA Innovator Early Adopter parishes that wants to be considered for the Special Leadership 100 program, go to the 2nd page and register on the GOA EPAP page. You do not need to register on both. Just register on one and we'll get you into the right list. And once everything is available, we'll let you know about it. Okay, so we talked about the first 3 pillars in a fair amount of detail. And to review, those were vision and planning and the 4 building blocks that support that. There was the pillar of leadership and teams and the 5 building blocks that support that pillar. And then the critical stewardship and generosity pillar and the 6 building blocks that support that. But we're going to begin tonight with the 4th of our operational pillars of effectiveness, and that is parishioner engagement. Now, before I get the ball rolling with Nick Chakos and Steve Tibbs on that particular topic, Let me set the stage by sharing a resource that I can't recommend strongly enough for every parish to read. The book is called Growing an Engaged Church: How to Stop Doing Church and Start Being the Church Again. So it's Growing an Engaged Church, and the author is Al Winsman, Winsman. And no, we don't get any commissions from any of these things. This is just a resource you're going to want to read. Al is the global practice leader for the faith-based organizations department at Gallup. And Gallup organization, believe it or not, has been surveying Christian churches for well over 70 years and acquiring an amazing empirical database. Now, this particular book, Growing an Engaged Church, is full of valuable information. But the biggest takeaway is that the number one thing that solves so many of your parish's problems is parishioner engagement. Let me just quote something real quickly from that book, and this is a direct quote. Spiritual commitment is usually a result of one big and often overlooked factor: congregational engagement. Focus on improving engagement and increased commitment will follow. How much members give financially, how many hours they volunteer in community service, and how often they invite others to their congregations are more dependent on engagement than any other factor. And that's a direct quote. And Gallup went on to say that those who are engaged actually also give more to the congregations than anyone else does. Each year, engaged members give a median, the halfway point, of 5% of their annual income. So before I get Nick and Steve to explain in greater detail the pillar of parishioner engagement, I want to leave you with the bottom line consideration from this incredible book, and I quote, "Your job as a leader is not to placate the actively disengaged. It is to create and grow disciples. One reason the United States congregations are in trouble is that they have a low percentage of engaged members. So the very first thing you as a leader must do to ensure congregation effectiveness is to clarify membership expectations and improve engagement," end quote. So let's dig into the effective parish pillar called parishioner engagement. So Nick Chakos is kind of one of the team leaders in this area. Why don't you start by explaining to the audience the why of the effective parish pillar of parishioner engagement? Why is it one of the 6 pillars that we've identified as most critical in the most effective and healthy parishes?
Well, Bill, I mean, you're absolutely right. And so is the Gallup poll. Engaged members, they give more to the church, they turn up more, but that is not really the why of why parishes should try and engage their members. I mean, every Orthodox parish and pretty much every church in general, I mean, the why about why we should get parishioners more engaged is really to help transform and improve people, to strengthen the body of Christ and bring people closer to his salvation. Everything starts and ends with salvation. And yes, you're absolutely right. You know, when you engage parishioners better, they will become more involved, and all the peripheral reasons why people should get engaged will be there. And the other things you said are really true as well. I mean, all the Barna survey data is absolutely correct. We are losing people from our parishes each and every single week and every single year. And without repeating all the Barna data, it's very simple that the old system just doesn't work. It just doesn't work, and we need to really kind of focus on that aspect and encourage parishes and people to really undertake a paradigm shift in the way that they approach all their ministries, all the ways that they engage parishioners. I mean, there are some things that you cannot change in a parish, and then there are some things that you can change, right? So we're not going to change the liturgy. We're not going to change any sacrament, but we really can change the way that we think about and implement every aspect of a parish that surrounds those unchangeable aspects.
And I think that's a really critical point. I'm glad you made it right from the very outset, because this is something we talked briefly about it in part 1. The Effective Parish Assessment tool and the model is based on the operational side of the house, not on the sacramental, ecclesiastical, the liturgical side of the house. That has its own critical importance. And in fact, it's kind of preeminent in its importance. But if we don't have the operational effectiveness to support everything else the church needs, then those things become problematic. And so that's why we're focused on the operational side of the house when we're dealing with these kinds of things. And as you point out, the byproduct of higher levels of engagement is all those things that you talked about: greater sacramental engagement, liturgical engagement, ministry engagement, financial engagement, you name it. So thank you for setting the proper tone on that. Now, under the effective parish pillar of parishioner engagement, what all of our research showed was there were 5 critical building blocks, each of which needs to be optimized to excellence. And they are spiritual education and catechism, liturgical and sacramental participation, outreach, evangelism, welcoming, and fellowship. So we're going to take a few minutes, ladies and gentlemen, and we're going to describe what each of these effective parish building blocks is and why they're so critical to form the support of the effective parish pillar of parishioner engagement. So the first one of these that we're going to start with is spiritual education and catechism. And so I'm going to invite Steve Tibbs to start us off on the importance of this building block of spiritual education and catechism, and what are some of the things that we're focused on in the effective parish assessment. Steve, you with us? I love technology, man. There you go. Okay, good.
I am now. I just, wait a minute. I put another quarter in the machine. It's working.
So for those that aren't paying attention, Steve's logging in from Pasadena. So any delay is due to the time zone differences. Okay,
yeah,
Steve.
We get lost over the Rockies.
There you go.
Well, yeah, thanks, Bill. So one of the things that I've really enjoyed working with this team is that we begin and end each other's sentences. And with Nick's introductory remarks, I looked at what I wrote, and he actually said exactly what I was going to say. So thank you, Nick, for that. But you bring up a really good point, is that in the first area under our youth education programs, are they effective? And I think everyone has seen in their parishes that we are quickly approaching a major paradigm shift come this fall in our religious education for our youth. Why is that? Because very few parishes, if any, have fully recovered from the pandemic with young families and children returning to church. And we see that most notably in our Sunday school programs. We were faced with this a few decades ago as we transitioned Sunday schools, and I would say, I can't speak conclusively across the United States, but the majority of our parishes now have moved from the prior model, which was to have Sunday school during liturgy and pulling the children out, and recalibrating that to have the children in liturgy, worshiping as full members of the church, and then having a supplemental religious education Sunday school classrooms after that. And we've transitioned to that. Now, some parishes are rethinking that model to say, you know what, the kids aren't coming back, and it really needs to focus in another direction. And so this youth education element is extremely important, because one of the characteristics about our Orthodox Church is the emphasis we do place on lifelong learning. And as we turn our children into a very secular society, and you've seen all the research studies that show, and Gallup pointed out, that this is the first time the majority of our nation is not affiliated with a religious organization, that we need to prepare them, and we need to figure out the most effective way to do that. So this area looks at the importance of, and some ideas related to youth education.
Yeah, and so we've got the critical point that you mentioned, and we're going to come back to that in yet another building block when we start to focus on the youth. And but it also, we have to look at what are we doing with regard to the catechumens that come into our church, right? And how are they educated and brought into the faith? And what are we providing as the spiritual education and feeding for the adults? I mean, you know, we've heard so many of the clergy talk about those of us that are cradle Orthodox and say they have to spend as much time recatechizing the cradles as they do the new converts, you know? And so you're starting to see from this kind of this whole building block that we're looking at on this area of spiritual education and catechism that is absolutely critical. Now, again, we're not getting into the theological component of it, but it's how do we go about more effectively doing our spiritual education and catechism. Nick, I know you have some observations on adding to the great insights that Steve brought up.
Yeah, it really comes down to basics, and it is, the things that I always talk about. It's educating the parishioners on the mission of the parish, again, which is salvation, catechism, all the things that you're talking about, Bill. So we need to educate the parishioners on why the parish exists, and then we need to challenge parishes to serve in it, and then we need to give every parishioner a clear path to involvement so that they can live out the mission of that parish in their daily lives.
Right.
And, again, when we rethink that paradigm of how we're delivering those aspects of parish engagement, that's when we really start to see churches become vibrant and healthy.
Yeah, and I think that is a critically important point. One of the sources that we looked at is the long-running National Study of Youth and Religion. And when they looked at and said, why is it that so many of our youth are kind of fading away from the church? What they discovered was that the largest and most effective influencer of those young people are their parents. And so if the parents aren't properly catechized, if the parents aren't properly educated, if the parents aren't probably living it in the education in a spiritual and a righteous way, as you point out, then there's less and less hope for the young people. So we see the integration of this whole aspect of spiritual education and the catechism as something that is a kind of a cradle to grave exercise, where there's never a point in your life cycle where there isn't more that you can and should do, to do those kinds of things that Nick was talking about in terms of, becoming closer to Christ and seeking the goal of salvation. So there are so many elements that when we assess spiritual education and catechism as a building block, that we can then define for your parish as an assessment of how well that's going. So let's flip to the second building block that supports the pillar of parishioner engagement. And that's a little subset of what we've been talking about, but a critically one, and that is liturgical and sacramental participation. Now, again, we're not, as Nick said, we're not talking about changing, the fundamental natures of the liturgical practices and whatnot, but how can we engage our people more in living liturgically and sacramentally the life of the church? So, Steve, again, why don't you start us off with a little bit about the importance of this building block of liturgical and sacramental participation?
Sure. Well, this is the core of what we do. This is the core of who we are. We are worshiping beings. And one of the things that sometimes comes into kind of a polar opposite is to track how we're doing with this. Sundays, and of course we have liturgies during the week as well, but the Sunday is the day. Sunday is the day where we should be prepared in our parishes to create a worshiping environment. And what do I mean by that? It could range anywhere from having greeters to ushers to a good sound system. The list goes on and on. We're not going to identify those elements here. But it could be simply a question of looking at the metrics of how many people attend on a Sunday. One of the things that we are challenged with today is the lingering participation of online worship.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That has gone down significantly for obvious reasons. But some parishes are being challenged by people who prefer to, and I'm not being derogatory in this is what people are saying, they prefer to watch the liturgy from home. And
Right.
liturgy is not something that is to be watched, it's to be experienced. So we need everybody in church. Church is all of us. But in this area, we will look at ways and things you can do to track your participation and attendance on a Sunday. Choirs have not fully reformed, but what this has done is it's caused a paradigm shift within some of our parishes to encourage congregational singing. Right. And they've always wanted to do that. You have some choirs that are coming out of the choir loft down into the nave and encouraging the singing. Making sure that our worship spaces are well maintained and respectful. Trying to encourage the regular participation of not only coming once or twice a week during the month for participation in liturgy, but all the time, because that's what the Lord wants out of us. He wants us to be in there worshiping. And then many parishes are establishing some very active prayer ministries. Certainly during the COVID, some prayer ministries started and they've continued. Some read the Psalms on a daily basis. And so whatever we can do to encourage that prayer ministry. So it goes anywhere from setting the stage on a Sunday for liturgy to extended prayer ministries to a reemphasis of choirs and congregational singing. So all of this doesn't ever pull away from our base theology and our dogma of the church, but it's those elements that would encourage greater parishioner involvement.
Right. That's a great way to put that. Nick, what additional insights would you like to add to this building block of liturgical and sacramental participation?
Yeah, I think it really comes down in the simplest term of continuing education or training. Bill, I mean, you were an attorney for a long time, and in order to keep your, certifications and your license, I'm sure you had to go through a number of hours of continuing education as an attorney. I know I need to do that to recertify myself as a professional. But we put so many expectations on our clergy that, they graduate from seminary and then they come to serve our parishes and they do so much, right? They perform all the sacraments, they counsel people, again, I mean, it's just unbelievable, but we typically as parish leaders or even as parishioners, we don't give them the time and the space to continue their own professional development. Yes, we have clergy ladies, we have all-American councils, we have parish life conferences, where clergy can take the time to go and enrich themselves. But I think we need to do a better job of encouraging our clergy, empowering them to really invest in themselves in terms of continued professional development. And there are so many ways that each of us can improve in our own professional lives, and certainly, clergy are no exception. So, when we look at things of what makes a better worship experience, like Steve was talking about, I'm sure many of our clergy can use, continuing education, whether it's in better homily giving or better, again, so many different things that they could do. So I think we just really need to make an effort to support our clergy in continuing professional development.
Yeah, and that's a very important point there, that this is part of the whole, right? In other words, the ecclesia is this kind of liturgia work of the clergy and the faithful working together. And so hopefully, listeners, what you're starting to hear by understanding as Nick and Steve did a good job of unpacking all of the elements of what is it that we're looking for when we're looking for parishioner engagement. What the Effective Parish Assessment tool does is it gives you the opportunity to assess your parish's effectiveness in each of the various sub-elements, so that, again, not for criticism, but so that you know the kinds of things that you can work on that will make a fundamental difference. What is it that we could do to optimize to excellence so that we can be much more effective in the area of liturgical and sacramental preparation and participation? So the third building block that we're going to talk briefly about is the incredibly important building block for parishioner engagement of outreach. And, outreach is always one of those things that we recognize as both a scriptural commandment from our Lord and as a personal obligation. And yet it's something that from time to time parishes struggle with. So I'm going to bring Mitch in to lead us off on kind of the importance of this building block of outreach and what are some of the things that we're looking at in the Effective Parish Assessment.
Thank you, Bill. When we think of outreach, and you might be thinking of evangelism, and we'll get to that in a little bit, but really what we're talking about in this area is, do we do works of good in our community? Do we impact the world beyond our parish? Do we have activities that take not only our time and energy, but even our resources, our money, and go to doing good to help, whether it's the homeless or those without shelter or those without means to take care of their lives for health or well-being. We all have parishes that have festivals and have events and fundraisers. Do we share part of what we make on those events to charities in our community that make our community a better Christian world and a better place for all? I think that's how I'd summarize the outreach piece.
And I think that's important. So everyone's starting to focus, because he said, we're going to get to evangelism next, but we need to start saying, what is our external focus, right? Because that's what the Lord called us to do, not just tend to our own people, our own parishioners, our own faithful, but the community. You'll remember, if you listen to part one, the question that we ask there and that we ask everywhere in every program we do: if your parish ceased to exist tomorrow, would anybody in the community miss you, other than maybe your ethnic food festival? And so the pillar is, as Mitch is starting to explain it, is really starting to focus on looking outside of the church and what we can do there. And Steve, you've got some insights and some experience also in the whole outreach area. So what would you add to Mitch's good foundation on the building block of outreach?
Well, it really comes from we've already used the term paradigm a few times, but it really comes from the culture within the parish. I've had an opportunity to, like many on the call, do a number of strategic plans. And one of the things that I look at as an assessment of where the parish
Yep, we lost you there, Steve, for a second. Yeah. You're saying where the parish? Okay? Yeah, you're back. Yeah.
Yeah. So where does the parish focus its energies? And again, when we define culture, really those habits within an organization that people are not thinking about.
All right, you're kind of fading in and out here, partner. So that you guys having a blackout in California again? Is this one of those roving blackouts, or are we?
I'll put another quarter in the machine again.
There you go.
But what we found is that parishes spend most of their time in two dimensions. One, they look inwardly, not outwardly, as a primary focus. And inwardly, they're looking primarily at the unity and the functioning of the community, how connected are the parishioners to one another and to internal activities. And then also looking at their own internal structures and processes that they use to manage. Right. But typically they do not, as a natural inclination, look outwardly to the community. And Bill, to your point, if your parish went away, other than somebody saying, "Oh, no more Greek food," would we be missed? And don't get me wrong, there are some parishes that do very effective outreach programs, but for the most part, that is not a natural inclination within our parishes. If you look at the research, and one of the concerns that many of our parishes have is growth, right? How do we grow? How do we grow? Well, are you going to grow inwardly by improving your internal processes, or are you going to grow outwardly by spreading your message and touching people and if you will, spreading the name of your parish to others and inviting them in? And that's where the connection is with welcome teams and everything else. So great opportunity, fantastic opportunity to do this. And to Mitch's point, every fundraiser should have an element of knowing what charities or services your gifts will be, how the gifts will be used to serve others outside the community.
Yeah, and that point can't be overstated. I often cite the research that shows that parishes that have both an external focus in their generosity as well as an internal focus will raise 3 to 4 times more money from their faithful than parishes that only have an internal focus. So again, we're not doing it to raise the money, but what you're demonstrating here is, and what this effective parish assessment is trying to assess, is how good is your parish doing at this outreach work that is so critically important, not only to the mission of the church as Christ defined it, but as to the success in operations. So the fourth building block of the parishioner engagement is kind of what is often the twin sister or cousin, if you will, of outreach, and that's evangelism. So Steve, why don't you kind of start us off again with the building block and the importance of the building block of evangelism and how we look at it in the effective parish assessment?
Sure. So yes, it's typically the term outreach and evangelism are used in one sentence, and the reality is that would be saying like an arm and a leg. They have different functions. They're connected to the body, but there's a uniqueness to each of them. Right. I remember a parishioner at my own parish was a former Calvary Chapel minister, and he said that I could bring people to Christ in one day in my parish. Of course, he then went on to say, and I could bring them to Christ. I would baptize them. I would make them a member of my church, and I give them a stewardship card all in one day. So we're not quite to that level, nor do we want to be. But the whole point behind this is that evangelism is bringing people to Christ, and that is something that is not natural in many of our parishes as well. I reflect on a conversation I had with a very, very, very active parishioner, and she said, and loved the Lord and was at all the services and was a huge giver. And she said, I just simply don't know what to say. I don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
And so encouraging some training on how to be an evangelist, what to say, how to say it. And really, we're starting to get into apologetics now, but it's equipping our parishioners to go out. So, do we regularly invite people to worship services? Do we have an effective, welcoming team? Do we have the right materials? Do we establish small group ministries? If you look at the religious and church articles for all churches, small group ministries now is a very active effort within many churches. Do we do evangelism with a degree of intentionality? Do we have money in our operating budgets for evangelism? Do we hold ourselves accountable? Not on a head count, how many did we bring in, but in the efforts that we took to bring Christ to others. As I mentioned, training. Do our parishioners kind of know the basics facts? To Nick's point, ongoing education. Do they know how to describe the Orthodox Church in a very concise and impactful way? And then is our website. Majority of the decisions on visiting a church come from your website. Is your website appealing? Does it draw people in? Does it give information? We all know we don't like spending a lot of time trying to hunt information down on websites. But is your website designed from an external perspective? I encourage on any website design to go out and find 20 non-parishioners and have them look at your website and give you real feedback. So these are the areas on evangelism that we can do to, again, outward focus. And are we equipping our parishioners to go out? The analogy I like to use is, if we were going to send missionaries to Africa, you would prepare them. Well, if we're going to send missionaries out locally, we need to prepare them as well.
Right. And I think this is what hopefully people are starting to get a sense of, that we're trying to help you do, is to create a baseline assessment of where is your parish on all of these critical aspects that are true in the most effective parishes, so that you can then start to build the strategies to improve those areas that need improvement. So finally, the fifth building block in the parishioner engagement one is one that's near and dear to all of our hearts, and it's welcoming and fellowship. And I'm going to lead off on this with just a little bit of data. And this was done in a large survey that was identifying the 5 things that people look for most in picking a church that they will go to and continue to go to. And the number 2 item on that list of the top 5 was feeling welcomed. 79% of the respondents said that was the most important thing. And it was only beat by a few percentage points by the number 1 choice, which was the quality of sermons. But that's another conversation for another day. We've already done 2 programs here on Stewardship Calling on Ancient Faith Radio about that. So the welcoming aspect is so critical to everything we're talking about in the pillar of parishioner engagement. And a welcoming experience is truly orthodox in its foundation. It's creating that loving environment that the Lord called us all to do in John 13, 34, 35, kind of his commandment that we love one another. It helps reinforce people that they made the right decision to worship with you. It makes them want to come back, and it makes them feel like family. And it really starts to emulate that kingdom of God approach. And when you do that, the mistake that most people make is they just think they have a newcomer committee in the narthex and that's it. My brothers and sisters, that's the beginning. That ain't it. That's the table stakes. You got to have that, but that's not going to be enough. what really makes the difference in the total welcoming experience, and that's the phrase a lot of us use all the time, is the total welcoming experience, is actually engaging with them to find out about them, learn something about them, and then here's the key, then connect them with people in the parish with whom they have similarities or overlaps or things of that nature, so that they will again start to feel like, hey, this is starting to feel like home, right? And so we're really talking about how are we fully engaging people and welcoming them. And kind of the last stat that I always throw out is that in a pretty significant study, what they found is that 71% of Protestants and non-denominational big church goers have invited someone to attend a worship service with them in the last 6 months. Let me say that again. About 3/4 of those folks have invited not another parishioner, but a stranger to join them in church within the last 6 months. And 1/4 of them, 25% of them, have invited at least 3 people or families within that last period of time. And so I always ask Orthodox Christians at the programs I do, when was the last time you invited a non-Orthodox stranger to join you in church services? And you can imagine that normally I hear crickets. But Steve, I know you have a lot of good thoughts and got a lot of good experience and can help explain some of the things that we're looking for in the Effective Parish Assessment on the building block of welcoming and fellowship.
Sure. So, I mean, it starts out with a culture and an attitude of friendliness. And there's not one parish out there that I've ever spoken to when I ask, are you friendly, that said, nope, we're not particularly friendly. Everyone thinks they're friendly.
Yeah. Exactly.
What happens is it's in that context, though, of you're more than welcome to join us. And then what happens is the individual goes to a pew and then they're kind of forgotten and coffee hour happens and then, they leave. To Bill's point, it's about connection. It's about connecting. So the people on your welcome team really, first of all, to have a welcome team, to have an intentional welcome team of individuals that have been trained on the basics of orthodoxy. You can explain it to someone in a very crisp manner. You can explain a liturgy because remember, a visitor has no idea what they're walking into behind those big doors. Yeah. And so it's a little scary. Now, the online experiences we have found, and we hear this in many parishes, the fact that we have so many new faces. We have so many new visitors. Well, that's because they've been watching us for 2 years. They've been able to experience a liturgy and that fear of the unknown, if you will. They've been able to do some research. They kind of know what they're walking into now. So that lowers the degree of hesitation to come visit us. But be that may, your welcome team also should be comprised of individuals that know people in the parish. So actually, just last week, someone came to my own parish. We have a very dedicated welcome team. This person is Egyptian, and our lead on our welcome team said, after coffee hour, I'm going to introduce you. And he took them right over to, a fellow Egyptian, and they hit it off. And at the end of that conversation, he overheard them say, I'll see you next week.
There you go.
So it's all about, and the last point too, is that in having spoken to many Protestants, I've got some good friends that do church shopping from time to time. That's what they call it.
Yeah.
And I asked them, how long does it take you to decide? Now, there's been various research done on this. Yeah. I saw one actually today that said it takes 7 seconds to determine, do I belong here? And what that means is people walk into a church, they look around, and the first thing they ask themselves unconsciously is there anybody in here like me?
Yeah.
And if there's nobody in here like me, then they may be inclined to turn around and walk out.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that is a challenge as well, is that connection, having information, making them feel, and also do the visitor walk. As I mentioned, having outside individuals look at your website, invite a non-parishioner, drop them off in the parking lot and say, okay, now go find the front door to the church.
Right.
And some cases it's easy. So, and they're going to be nervous anyway. So whatever we can do to ease them in will be beneficial. And those are some of the things that we look at from the building blocks as well.
Yeah, and so this is all part of the assessment tool that we're doing to help give you a sense of kind of where you are and what you're doing in this regard. And one of the funds that you just made me think about, Steve, is that as a couple of parishes migrated during the pre-COVID period, during the COVID period, as they migrated to obviously more online worshiping because the sanctuaries in some cities were closed, one of the things I found fascinating when I was actually doing some online searching for professional purposes, right, just to assess parishes, right, there was one parish that most people would cut off the comments on YouTube and stuff like that, right? Because they didn't want, reckless chatter going on. But one of the parishes that I thought was phenomenal was they had a parishioner who was moderating the chat room. And so as people were watching and going, what was that? Or what did he say? Or what did he do? Or why did that happen? There was somebody that was able to crisply respond. And it was like having your own tour guide in answering your questions. And I thought, there's a parish that really understands welcoming, because they weren't going to leave anybody behind, including those that kind of wandered into the electronic worship area. So, brothers and sisters, in a very, very brief fashion, obviously we could go on and on in this regard. What we've tried to do is expose you a little bit to the pillar of parishioner engagement and the 5 supportive building blocks that we look at assessing in your parish and helping you optimize to excellence. The areas of spiritual education and catechism, liturgical and sacramental participation, outreach, evangelism, welcoming, and fellowship. And the Orthodox Ministry Services Effective Parish Assessment program is kind of uniquely designed to help you methodically assess this critical pillar and those 5 building blocks for your parish. So we're going to take another short break right now. And when I come back, we'll continue to explore the Effective Parish Assessment as in the 6 pillars and the 30 building blocks as we move to the 5th pillar of operational excellence and effectiveness. So let's take a short break, and we'll be right back.
Bill will be right back, but the lines are open if you want to ask a question or offer your thoughts. The number is 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO.
Hi, this is John Maddox. How often have you heard this story? A young priest and his family graduate from seminary. They're assigned to a small but promising mission parish. But as much as the mission would like to pay their new priest enough to live on, he often has to find another job to make ends meet. Introducing Share the Faith Ministries, coming alongside the parish to help with those extra unexpected costs, which neither the priest nor the parish can afford. But in order for Share the Faith Ministries to do this, they need donations from us. And with over 100 new missions in the United States alone, this fund is needed now more than ever. Blessed and sponsored by Archbishop Paul of blessed memory, Share the Faith Ministries has helped 5 mission priests to date, but they want to do more. Give what you can at sharethefaith.net. That's sharethefaith.net.
Stewardship Calling is back, and we are ready for your call at 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO. Here again is Bill Marianis.
So welcome back to Stewardship Calling Live in our first Wednesday program here on Ancient Faith Radio, where we're discussing the Effective Parish Assessment Program and how your parish could receive a valuable and free service with my colleagues at Orthodox Ministry Services. Again, as we mentioned, we'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions or comments at 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346. We're also live right now, not only on Ancient Faith Radio or on the Ancient Faith app. We're also live on Facebook and YouTube. So any of our listeners there can reach out to us also, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. Remember, after this program is done, we hope that you will check out effectiveparish.org, and look at the resources and the information about the Effective Parish Assessment, this free, valuable tool that will be available to you shortly. And if you're an Orthodox parish that's interested, you can reach out by filling out that form or emailing us at info@effectiveparish.org. And if you're one of the GOA parishes that would like to participate in the Leadership 100 supported special GOA Effective Parish Assessment Program, you could go to the second page on the website. the GOA EPAP page and look a little bit more about that, and then you could register there. You only have to register on one of the pages. We'll get you on the mailing list, and as things become open and available in the near future, we will reach out to you. So now we're approaching the fifth of the 6 pillars of the most effective churches, and that is one of ministries. Now, ministries could not be overstated in its importance and its significance to the driving livingness, the survival, the expansion, the fulfilling of Christ's mission that happens at our churches. So again, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Nick Chakos, to kind of set the stage kind of with the whole why of the Effective Parish Assessment pillar on ministries.
Well, there's one reason why we have ministries at churches, and that's because we want to bring more people to Christ, to help more people to get to know him and his church. But again, the problem goes back to people believing that they know what is best, and people who have traditionally been involved in ministries not being willing to change their thinking, to change their paradigm and how they implement ministries. There's a pretty famous leadership example of Steve Jobs. And a lot of people don't know that even though the iPhone was launched in 2007, for years and years and years, Steve Jobs insisted that he would never, ever make a phone. And then, the reason that he did change is that he had surrounded himself with people who knew different ways of looking at things. I mean, he had surrounded himself with people that would help him change his paradigm, help change his way of thinking. And if Steve Jobs hadn't surrounded himself with people who knew how to change his mind, he might not have ever changed the world through the invention of the iPhone. So, the lesson from this is that there are plenty of leaders who are out there that are so sure of themselves that they reject a lot of the worthy opinions and ideas from others. And so many of us, especially in church ministry, we refuse to abandon our own ideas of how we think things should run.
Yeah.
And yeah, right. So we see that just time and time and time again. And what we don't realize is that ministry is really about the experience of people who participate in those ministries. So rather than focusing on the transformation of people and the transformation of or the ability to help young people, senior citizens, or whatever group we're ministering to help them deepen their personal relationship with Jesus, we focus on the activities. And so rather than, deepening the experience and the relationship with Christ, we focus on the tactics and really on sort of the day-to-day activities. And then, finally, what I'll say is, there was also a famous music executive. He was the president of Warner Music. And when he took over Warner Brothers Records, he told his employees, he said, we need to stop trying to make hit records. He said, let's just make good records instead and turn them into hits. And I feel like that's what we do so much with so many of the ministries at our church. We keep overly trying to make things successful. We keep focusing on the numbers of people that come into ministry. We keep trying to make things more attractive rather than producing really, really good quality ministries, things that deepen our relationships with the church, deepen our engagement with the church, deepen our relationship with Christ, and allowing those things to naturally and organically become successful.
So you're starting to get a picture, folks, hopefully, of the reason why, from a fundamental perspective, the elements that we're going to talk about next form this critical pillar that holds up our most effective churches, of the ministries that we're actually doing to kind of fulfill the gospel that we've been asked to do. Now, when we started the Effective Parish Assessment, we kind of reverse engineered it. We started by looking at the data and the research and saying, what are those critical elements that are important, that are root cause, directional impact that we can have of a parish that makes it much better? And then from those, we were then able to organize them. So as it turned out, there were 5 critical building blocks that ended up fitting logically into this pillar we call ministries. And we're going to briefly go through each of them one at a time. So it's defining the needs of the parishioners. It's ministry management, the actual act of managing. It's ministry engagement. It's volunteer management, and then we're going to focus on a critical niche of youth and young adults. So let's start with the first building block of ministries, which is defining the needs of the parishioners. And Nick, why don't you start us off on the importance of that building block and what it means and what we're looking at in the Effective Parish Assessment?
Sure. Well, defining the needs of our parishioners is really about listening. All of our parishes have needs and struggles. And, you know, a healthy and vibrant growing parish listens to the needs and the desires of their parishes, especially in their ministries. You know, the challenge or the problem is the parishes really don't have any sort of diagnostic process or tool to ascertain the real challenges that keep the faithful from participating and creating in relevant materials, ministries. So, you know, the relevancy challenge is really to sort of identify some sort of benchmark of priorities that the parish can judge their performance by. So we really need to understand how to implement these actions, really kind of understand some of these benchmarks, so we can help the leaders within our communities, you know, really develop ministries and engagement opportunities that address the needs of the people.
Right. That's exactly a great way to put it in terms of the notion of understanding what it is that the parishioners need so that they can be more fully engaged. Now, Mitch, you too, in your work, have done a lot of work on this particular building block about helping to define the needs of parishioners and how we use that to support the pillar of ministry. So why don't you share a little bit about that and how it fits into the EPA?
Yeah, and I'll just add to Nick's comments about listening. This is critical. But it's also targeted listening. When we think of who we need to listen to for ministry, it's often the person who's not participating that has knowledge that we're not getting. Why are the youth not coming to the youth events? Why are parents not encouraging it? You know, every parish has a story of a dedicated volunteer who thinks they know what program should be or what the ministry should do based on their worldview and their experience as a child or as a young adult coming up to a parish, and they try to place that concept on the ministry. And I think this first building block is about taking a step back and understanding the needs, and not just the needs in general, but needs within the various different types of communities within the church, whether you're working with seniors and what their needs are versus the young people, or maybe there's a group of young adults that would benefit from a ministry of bringing them together. And so it goes back to kind of what Nick said all at the beginning, which is it's about listening, it's about understanding the needs, but not just focusing on the three people that show up every time. And because they participate a lot, you give their thoughts more value. It's often the reason no one else is coming. I hate to say it. I think in all the parishes I've worked with, this is an area that needs strengthening. It's just not a common thing. And I'm going to tie back, Bill, to what we talked about Sunday night about leadership and difficult conversations. There's this connection between a parish's ability to have conversations when they're unhappy or when they're not enjoying an experience that we don't have the ability to do, that limits our ability to define the needs. Because you know, if I go to an event and I don't enjoy it, or I've participated in a study group and it's not what I would have done, and I didn't like the way it worked, we often just leave and don't say anything. And so it's about having a system and mechanism in place where you're capturing those thoughts and those needs throughout the year.
And so I think hopefully everybody is starting to get a sense of why, when we were building the building block of ministry, one of the essential critical criterion was right at the beginning is understanding and then defining the needs of the parishioners. Now, the second building block that forms this critical pillar of ministries within the most effective parishes is ministry management, the actual act of how do we most effectively manage the ministries that the parish has decided to engage. So, Nick, why don't you start off by sharing what it is that we're looking for and some of the things that can drive the effectiveness of a parish in proper ministry management?
Sure. I mean, in the simplest form, we are looking to manage ministries better because they directly support parish growth and vitality. I mean, quite simply, when we have better parish and parishioner engagement, it will ultimately lead more people to Christ's salvation. And when we manage our ministries better, and when we bring more people to Christ's salvation through the church, through that process, our parishes are going to grow stronger and more vibrant. We're going to increase attendance, we're going to increase stewardship, and we're ultimately increase, you know, the entire vitality of the parish. So managing things better is not just a tactic, to hit certain numbers, but it really is a catalytic event to increase vitality and bring more people to Christ's salvation.
And I love the way you use the word catalytic, because that's exactly right. It basically starts a chain of events that themselves allows for greater growth, greater expansion, and greater connectedness, both to each other and more importantly to Christ. And so the notion, and again, so oftentimes, and those of you that are listening who are involved in your parishes know that, we put these ministries out there and we don't necessarily invest in the time and understanding how is it that we can make this the most effective ministry that we possibly can, and how can we leverage our resources? One of the techniques that we've started to see, some of us been preaching it for a long time, and increasingly we're starting it to see occur on the orthosphere, is the notion of a council of ministries, where all of the ministry leaders come together on a regular basis and they share their why, the why of their ministry. They share what the vision that they're trying to accomplish that ministry. They share what they're doing to accomplish that, and they talk about ways that they can be synergistic with some of the other ministries or avoid conflicts with the other ministries. But that is an example of the things that Nick was talking about as an active degree of management of the ministry, not for some corporate objective, but for the objective of making them far more effective at what it is that is their why, and in bringing people closer to Christ and each other. So
Bill, if I can just cut in and say
please.
That really, I mean, in the parishes that I've worked with, that I've seen that are the most vibrant and really the most successful parishes, they all have a council of ministries. And that is just an idea. And Bill, I know you love this idea as well. In fact, I think it, in so many ways you taught this to me, and we've implemented in my own parish, is that a council of ministries is separate from a parish council, and it is just laser focused on the enhancement and the vitality and the vibrancy of ministry. It is free from the administration of a parish. It is free from the finance of the parish, and it is really just focused on creating a better experience, whether it's a worship experience, a sacramental experience, or a ministerial experience for the parishioners in a parish. And I'm telling you, it is one of the most successful ways to grow a healthy parish.
And I think what you're hearing, ladies and gentlemen, is the experiences that have been validated not only in the orthosphere but in other churches, and we've adapted them into the Orthodox ecosystem, are the kinds of things that we're looking at to see where are there opportunities for building blocks within your parish to help you grow and expand. And that's what the whole Effective Parish Assessment is laser focused on, is how can we help you assess the things that are most effective and most important, and how your parish assesses on that, and then where can we go to build that. Now, the third building block in the pillar of ministries is the kind of the flip side in some respect. It's the ministry engagement. It's not the management of it now. It's how do we actually get folks engaged in ministry. And yeah, every one of us that have done strategic planning for churches or dioceses or metropolises, and it doesn't matter the jurisdiction, it doesn't matter the geography, it doesn't matter the parish size, we always hear the exact same complaint that comes in on the weaknesses and the complaints, and that is Alfredo Pareto. And for those of you that are not familiar with Alfredo Pareto, you are familiar with the 80-20 rule, right? The rule that says that 80% of the work is done by 20% of the people. And that's a validated principle. That just isn't something that was made up. But here's the interesting question. Have you ever asked yourself, why is that the case in your church work? I mean, indeed, if our churches are where we are to get closer to Christ and each other, and if our ministries are the vehicles through which we do the work of the church, it doesn't make sense that we'd find it to be so hard to find people to help. Now, believe it or not, there's actually data-driven answers for that question. Because one of the first things that we ask parishes is, have you ever asked or surveyed your faithful to find out why they're not engaged? Where are that 80% going, as Mitch said, the voices that you don't hear, the people that aren't in the usual rooms, right? Now, everybody, when I ask that question, and we've all faced this experience, and you all are probably thinking it right now, is, oh, well, the answer I always get is we're too busy. And that's the old excuse that we always hear. Now, I'm going to say something that may sound controversial and it may sound obstreperous, but that's not my point. If someone's telling you that they're too busy, they're not telling you the whole truth. Now, of course, they are busy. I get it. Who amongst us isn't? But what that excuse is really saying is that they don't value as highly the importance of whatever it is that you're asking them to engage in, whatever ministry you're asking them to get involved in. I mean, think about it. If one of their family members got injured or sick, man, they drop everything to help them because that's important. And the reason that they do that is because they're ready to reprioritize to that which is most important. So the bad news, my brothers and sisters, is that people are telling you that they're too busy. What they're really saying to you is that you have not made the case to them of the importance of their voluntarism in that ministry, or for that matter, in any ministry, or you haven't presented them a ministry option that they feel is critical or where they feel they have gifts. So for the most part, when we hear that excuse, and I know nobody likes me saying this, but it's really a failure of the case that we've made for the ministry, which means, here's the good news, that's something we can fix. Remember that quote that I repeat over and over again from the father of the quality movement: when a majority of the people, 80%, act a particular way the majority of time, not engaged in ministry, the people aren't the problem. The problem is inherent in the system. And as leaders, we have the responsibility for the system. So as we start to think about ministry engagement, there is something that we must assess first as how we're doing, and then remediate and make it better. So Nick, why don't you kick off a little bit more about the importance of this building block of ministry engagement?
Well, you're absolutely right. We make time for the things that have relevancy to our lives, and we prioritize those things that give us a good experience. Now, when it comes to the church, as we've said this entire discussion, we are not talking about changing the unchangeable. But those aspects of ministerial life and parish engagement that we can change, we really do need to stop and listen to why people don't prioritize church ministry or engagement in ministry. And recently, I was in New York at St. Vladimir Seminary, participating in a retreat that did listen at a very deep level to young adults on why they aren't involved in church ministries.
Bob, that was amazingly insightful, wasn't it?
It really was. It was fantastic, and it's everything that we've said before. And it is just that young people do not feel heard in the church. They feel talked to and not heard. And again, as leaders in the church, we often think that we have the right way. We know what the answer is, and we don't take the time to change our thinking, to change our mentality, or to change the paradigm in which we implement these ministries. So until, we learn, and until we learn to change ourselves and really change our habits and listen, to those that we are trying to minister to, we will miss the opportunity to become all things to all people. So, part of the EPA assessment process and part of the work that OMS does is really sitting with parishes and sitting with parishioners of those parishes and listening to them, identifying their needs, and then crafting individualized solutions to help parishes address the needs of their particular community.
And so, my brothers and sisters, if you listen to what Nick just said, hopefully you're starting to understand the importance of why we're assessing this building block in your parish through the Effective Parish Assessment, so that we can help give you better guidance and insights as to how effective or ineffective you are right now. Not for the purpose of criticism, but for the purposes of improving and recognizing that, as well-intentioned as we were, if it ain't working, and we got to fix it. Now, Mitch, I know you have had some experience actually working in the ministry engagement mission field and how you go about making that change and this whole notion of change management and things of that nature. Why don't you share a little bit about this building block of ministry engagement?
Well, I think that y'all have done such a good job, but I think when we look at the forces that drive ministries forward, the involvement of how you're connecting with those members, how you're accommodating the needs and bringing them together play a huge role. And I think when we do the strategic planning effort and we're doing these huge needs assessments and getting input, and when we start looking at, let's just take youth development for an example, when we're looking at that component and the data comes out and shows what needs to happen, it drives those engagements. Now, I'm going to use one example that came from parish. I won't mention it, but one of the things that was really remarkable is that when they start getting outside the box and thinking about engagement of ministries, they start to come up with creative ideas. One of the most creative I've heard in the last few years is a parish in which each ministry has to engage the other ministries in some activity.
Oh,
an example
yeah.
would be youth being involved in a senior event, youth being involved in an outreach effort, youth being involved in welcoming, and a Sunday of making sure people feel included when they come to church. So there's all different ways that when we really think about the diversity of the community and we think about the challenges that people face, that we can create some engagement within the ministries. I'm not sure that's what you were asking, Bill, but that's kind of where my mind went.
Well, your mind's in the right place. So, brothers and sisters, if you listen to the way we're building this, and again, this came from looking at the parishes themselves. In the area of ministries, we had to start by defining the needs of the parishioners. Then we had to make sure that we had properly managed the ministries so that we could achieve those needs. Now you've heard us talk about engaging people in a greater degree in those ministries. And so that leads then to the natural fourth building block that we're really kind of talking about in this context is once we've got them, how do we manage the ministry? How do we manage the ministry engagement process? But how do we really get into the whole objective here of ensuring that the volunteers that are serving in the ministry are fulfilling that which attracted them to that ministry? So let's talk a little bit in this fourth building block of volunteer management. Now that we've built it, we've recruited them, now we got to manage that. Nick, why don't you start us off with some of the importance and some of the things we're looking at in volunteer management?
Well, this is where it really does become tactical and very process-oriented. And this is where many parishes struggle to implement these sorts of management, procedures and processes. When it comes to dealing with people and training people and empowering people and equipping people to serve others, there is inherently a process of training, equipping, and process, and then benchmarking and evaluating how well those people are doing. And again, the EPA process that OMS has developed that we're all talking about tonight, this is a free and very effective tool that OMS is currently offering to GOA parishes and others that really adds a lot of strength to parishes. Most people are not natural volunteer managers. Most people are not natural trainers. They don't have these systems in place. But, we at OMS, we really do have these tools and resources that are very easily deployable and available to parishes to help them in these processes.
Yeah, and I think that's a key point that needs to be made here in terms of identifying the area and the weakness and the challenge is one thing. Finding the solution is another one. Now, if y'all were listening to the credentials here, and again, I think we got 11 or 12 degrees amongst us, which I think is 12 degrees below zero or something. But anyway, one of the things that several of the OMS colleagues have worked on, but particularly Steve spent a career on the whole notion of managing human resources and human capital and organizing and volunteers and paid people and really trying to identify the human component here and how do we get them to optimize. So Steve, why don't you share a little bit about the building block of volunteer management?
Sure. So rule number one is volunteers are people too. And
oh no, I didn't realize that. Yeah.
And what do people like when they're given a task? They like to know, what is the task? What would you like me to do? Expectation management.
Yep.
If it's a complex task, is there training that goes along with it? And then give me some feedback. How am I doing? And right. And what happens with volunteer management, back to this 80-20, and by the way, I've worked with some parishes that have eclipsed that, and they're 90-10. There is sometimes a hesitancy to give feedback to volunteers.
Yeah.
Why? Because they fear that their volunteer is going to flee.
Right.
And the reality is the volunteers really appreciate the feedback because they want to do a good job, because they're committed to that. So this gets into just the basics of good management. How many times have we seen someone that no one knows show up to a ministry event? Could be a festival. They show up and they want to cook in the Edo booth. well, everybody's kind of got locked into their roles over the last 15 years of who cooks and who, does this and that. And what happens is that person's kind of parked to the side.
Yeah.
And they just kind of stand there. And people are polite to them, but they don't feel that they're really providing any value by being there. And so what happens is that we essentially block out volunteers. One data point which continues to amaze me, and Bill mentioned in the Sunday nights program that I like to do surveys as part of the strategic planning process. And the question I always put in there is, I would like to volunteer more of my time to the church. And on average, we get a 60% yes to that.
Wow.
And you see that so back to Deming's point of systemic issues, if we have 60% of the participants, and in some cases we have over 200 participants in the survey, that means 120 people are in your parish saying, I'd like to volunteer more of my time.
Right.
So there's that opportunity to do that. The other big element from not including individuals that do show up is asking them to do too much.
Yeah.
Working with Sunday school directors, they may say, well, we need to find a teacher. So what they do is they go up to someone, a candidate in the parish who, that morning didn't think anything about being a Sunday school teacher. And they're approached and they say, would you like to teach the 4th grade Sunday school classroom? They go, sure. What's involved with it? Oh, it's very simple. It's only 35 weeks and you only have to teach 45 minutes every Sunday. And as their eyes widen and they start to take a step back, they realize that, no, that's too much. But effective directors said, well, tell you what, could you, be there for 10 minutes just to greet the kids for the first year, pour juice, give them a snack, and just interact with the kids and love them? Sure, I can do that. Great. And then you build over time. So it's that balance of providing the opportunities, being inclusive, and then just be giving good, appreciative feedback to an individual. And you know what? Most reasonable people know when they're not doing well, when they're not performing well.
Yep.
And that's not a situation that you want to put a volunteer in. So, if they're not doing well, find another role for them, encourage them, be inclusive.
Right. And I think, so hopefully, brothers, so what you've heard here, and again, this is empirical data coming from the work that's been done here, right? So when Steve tells you that 60% of the respondents are willing to go further in their ministry work, you understand that 80-20 rule doesn't have to be that way. There's something in the processes, the systems, the way you're operating that's impeding those people who really do want to go further and deeper in their ministry and in their services. And so this is why this Effective Parish Assessment tool is designed to help you ferret that out a little bit and then start to diagnose where we can make those improvements. All right, the 5th and final building block under ministries is not a generic one, although it actually in some respects is. It is so critically important. It came up in every parish that any of us have ever worked on, in any plan we've ever worked on, in any ministry we've ever worked on. If there was a ministry that cried out every time, every place, it's the ministry of retired lawyers. No, I'm sorry. That's the wrong one. Okay, I'm sorry. It's the ministry of youth and young adults. And that is so critically important because it feeds and fuels everything else that happens. And you've heard plenty of examples thus far, but I want to kind of drill in on that. So, Nick, I really want you to kind of build us a little bit a story on this building block that is associated with youth and young adults.
Well, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but it really goes back to listening and hearing youth and young adults and meeting them, where they are. When you look at the surveys and the research, and then even a lot of the very effective programs that we have in the Orthodox Church in understanding why youth and young adults don't feel connected to the church, it's not that they aren't spiritual, it's that the church doesn't provide any relevancy to their current situation or their current lives.
Yeah.
And rather, instead of listening to that and adjusting our ministries and our programs to those needs and to them, we continue to do the same old thing over and over and over and over again. And rather than deepening a personal relationship with Christ to each and every young person that is in our parish, we think that another pizza party or another basketball tournament is going to be, the way to keep them in the church. One of the things that we most frequently say is that we want to keep our kids in the church. I think a much better saying is we want to keep the church in our young people.
Wow,
and
that's great.
Keeping the church in our young people is really listening to them, hearing them, and designing vibrant and vital ministries that provide them with a personal relationship with Jesus Christ and allow them to feel the experience of the church. So creating ministries that allow young people to experience the fullness of the faith is really what we're after here.
And in a separate program that we're going to have coming up, we're going to actually do a full deep dive on the brand new pan-Orthodox youth ministry that's in the process of being pulled together and formed. And as a part of that, I'm going to have Nick come back on and talk in more detail about the Effective Christian Ministry program that he's been a part of piloting. Some of you may remember an earlier program I did with Steve Christoforo when we first talked about ECM, the Effective Christian Ministry. And this is one of the very specific areas that builds out this effective parish that we're talking about, optimizing to excellence. And so we're going to spend some more time on that. But in the interest of time right now, what we've tried to explain to you is the importance of that fifth pillar of the 6 pillars of the most excellent and healthy churches on ministries that focuses on first starting with the needs of the parishioners, creating and managing the ministries properly, engaging the people in them when they are engaged, managing their volunteer engagement, and specifically focusing on how we put laser-like focus and intentionality behind the service to and engagement of our youth and young adults. And that's really what the 5th building block of ministries is all about. Okay, so we're going to take one more final break. And when I come back, we're going to continue the exploration of the Effective Parish Assessment program and look at the 6th and final pillar of an effective church. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, reach out to us at 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346. So let's take a short break and we'll be right back.
Bill will be right back. But the lines are open if you want to ask a question or offer your thoughts. The number is 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO.
Reading through the entire Bible in just 1 year. To an average person in today's busy world, it seems like a daunting challenge. But in the Orthodox Daily Scriptures podcast, Father Alexis Khoury makes it a journey that is not only rewarding, but simple and accessible as well.
They buried their bones under the oak tree at Jabesh and fasted 7 days. So Saul died for his lawlessness, which he committed against the Lord according to the word of the Lord, because he did not keep it, and because Saul sought counsel of a wizard, and Samuel the prophet answered him. So he slew him and turned the kingdom over to David.
To find this podcast and others like it, you can go to ancientfaith.com.
Stewardship Calling is back, and we are ready for your call at 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO. Here again is Bill Marianis.
So welcome back to Stewardship Calling and our first Wednesday program where we're exploring the Effective Parish Assessment that's focused on helping you assess your own parish on the 6 pillars and 30 building blocks of the most operationally effective and healthy parishes. And again, we'd welcome any calls that you have at 1-855-AF-RADIO, 1-855-237-2346. And those of you that have been emailing me during the program, I appreciate that. And hopefully we're answering your questions as we go through. Now, remember, after this program is done, we want you to check out effectiveparish.org, effectiveparish.org. And if you're interested in having access to this incredibly valuable, hopefully free tool, that it hopefully modified incredibly valuable, not free. It is going to be free, and we know it's going to be incredibly valuable tool. Then we would ask you to go to the Orthodox Effective Parish page and sign up either by sending us an email at info@effectiveparish.org or fill out the form that's there and we'll get your information. Again, we're not going to use it for any other purpose but to alert you and identify when this free tool is available for you. And if you're one of the GOA parishes that's willing to invest an even greater amount of effort and energy in the Special Leadership 100 supported program of the GOA Effective Parish Assessment Program, go to that third page and register at cohort parish at effectiveparish.org. Okay, so the sixth and important pillar of an effective parish is really a critical thing that we all spend time thinking about, but we've tried to organize it and give you an assessment of those critical elements, and it's the pillar of operational effectiveness, the overall pillar of operational effectiveness. Now, the first building block under operational effectiveness involves the communications and digital strategies. And you heard some of the conversation earlier when Steve was talking about it, and it came up in several different instances. Remember, we talked about the whole notion of how when people in the evangelism and in the outreach effort, looking at our digital assets and our communications assets are absolutely critically important in that. I mean, none of us have ever been involved in any parish strategic plan where they don't identify a lot of areas in which communications and technological interactions are critically important and need to be improved. And in fact, we expect that for many of the effective parish assessment results that we'll see, we're going to see some conclusions where the parish council or clergy get frustrated. And where the frustration is going to come from is they're going to find out from this assessment that comes from the parishioners and the leaders at the parish that they don't think something is working right or they don't know about something. And we're going to hear, we expect, from parish council members and clergy, but we're doing that. And so what that's underscoring is, again, there's something wrong with the system. If you're doing it and the parishioners don't understand it and are not engaged in it, that's something you can fix. That's why that Deming quote we keep coming back to is all about how do we make more operationally effective our parishes. And so when we focus on the top internal communications, the building block is assessing how effective are we at communicating with our parishioners. But as Steve and others alluded to earlier, it's equally critical that we look at our external communications because as was pointed out, that is the source of where people find our church and look at it. I'll give you some hard data, and sometimes people's heads explode when I give the data, but this is reliable empirical data. 97% of people search for churches online. So if you don't think your online presence, obviously your website and even your social media presence isn't important, the data tells you it is. What's interesting is they've developed what they call the first impression test. And it's a test that's designed for parishes that looks at the effectiveness of that website. And it focuses on things like the preliminary focal point, the responsiveness of the design, how quickly things load, the use of images, real images, as opposed to those stock images or those emoticons and things of that nature, and how accessible new visitor information, including scheduling and address and phones and contact information is. My brothers and sisters, if you are not providing all of that information easily accessible and quickly loadable on your homepage, you're failing 96.2%. You're in along with 96.2% of parish websites that actually fail on that. And so the feel of the website is the proven main driver. Now, I know this makes people crazy, but the research shows that decisions that are made about looking at a church or attending a church or going to church, 94% of the time is based on the design of the site, and only 6% of the time is based on the content after you get past some certain baseline elements like the address and the time of the services. So I'm not going to say, and none of us will tell you that the content is not important, but what we are telling you is the way you communicate, how you communicate, what you look like in that communication technology is equally as important. And kind of two other data points. Right now, over half, it's 53%, of the browsing of websites takes place on, wait for it, smartphones and tablets, not computers. So if you haven't looked at your website or your social media presence from a cell phone or a tablet, then you are missing out on a problem. And just to prove that we practice what we preach, after we built the effectiveparish.org website, Louis Lambrou said, okay, now we're going to look at it, what it looks like on a cell phone. And lo and behold, what we found is that in some cases, just the way the technology worked, buttons were reversed or something was in the wrong order. So we went back and we re-optimized it so that it works it works well on a cell phone as well as everything else. Your parish website, your parish social media has to be able to do the same thing, because the last data point, and this one is the one that's staggering, is that 80% of the people will stop engaging if your website loads completely in over 3 seconds. So those great images that you like and those flash things that you like, they will disengage. That's how bad we've gotten in terms of our attentiveness span. And the period of time in which people make that gut assessment is less than 1 second, right? So this is really important. And that's the reason why we spend so much time and energy talking about the communications and digital strategies. Now, Steve, I know that this is an area that you spend a lot of time with parishes talking about in their communications and technology and digital strategies. What would you like to add to the conversation?
Well, I think that the entire basis of the operational effectiveness area, we have to look at this notion of being good stewards, that we are in a leased property owned by God. And
I love, say that again. That is so beautiful. Say it again. It's really important.
That we are managing the properties. We are on a leased property owned by God.
There you
and
go.
One of the analogies I use there is, if anybody's ever been in an embassy, they know that the part of the characteristics of that embassy, as soon as you walk through that portal, you are in the sovereign governance of that country.
Right.
And from a mindset perspective, we should have the same mindset that the second anybody drives onto our property or steps foot on our property, they're in the sovereign property of God. And we are stewards, and we have been tasked with the responsibility of managing his property and to his glory. And so from that perspective, if we look at all the different elements of communication strategies and what we're doing to represent our church, and the other building blocks of facilities and technology.
Well, let's talk. Let's stop. Let me stop you just for a second, because you're doing a good job here, and I don't want to interrupt you anymore. So what Steve's segueing now is 2 consecutive building blocks. And they're related. One that's focused on the communications, and the second one that's focused on the facilities and technology. So let's merge them together for purposes of this discussion, even though we analyze them separately, because I think that's a helpful construct.
Sure. So this area that we're also looking at is many times viewed as the responsibility, the key role of a parish council. It's the administrative function, and of course the reality is it's everyone's responsibility. But we do understand that the parish council many times is given this responsibility to manage the administrative functions. Just another segue, many times this is referred to as the business of the parish.
Right.
The reality is, albeit incorrectly used, because the church isn't a business. But what happens is we're applying our professional skills in this area, and this is where professional skills can align with the needs of the parish. So as we get into facilities and technology, again, it's the representation of, are we taking care of the facilities that that are under our purview and responsibility. So you get simple things of, are the facilities in good condition? From a street view, what are we projecting? Are we projecting a well-kept, respectful property, or are we representing something that's run down and struggling? From a technology standpoint, Bill already just alluded to the fact, are we using old technology, or are we trying to represent something that is effective and designed to reach users? Do we have a long-term plan for the maintenance of our properties? Most parishes don't, but we have the opportunity to do that. If you have anybody in your parish that has any experience with homeowners associations, or property management, they are exceptionally good in this area that you can tap into. From a facility standpoint, one of the most important things that has been identified next to receiving communion in liturgy is the sermon. Have we ever been in parishes where you can't hear the priest? You can't discern what he's saying.
Yep.
It sounds like he's talking through a tin can. So, do you have an effective sound system? Now, we just recently did our sound system, our elements of our sound system, my own parish, and we did have some outside consultants come in. And the first thing they asked us was, where would you like the screens?
Yeah.
And I said, screens? Yes, where would you like the screens? Because all churches have video screens now. Don't you guys have video screens? No, we have icons. Thank you very much. But
although I actually have a video screen idea one day that actually fits in perfectly, where we're going to have the liturgy and the choir responses up on a screen so people can see it. But that's a conversation for another day. I know I'm way out there on this one, Steve.
I don't think that's in our assessment profile, but we'll get there.
It is not. It is absolutely outside the scope of what we're talking about, for sure.
But so all these elements, bottom line, are the facilities well kept? Are they respectful? And are they sending the impression that we want to send? So that's the facilities and technology element.
Yeah, and I think that is so important. I just finished one strategic plan where high up on the weaknesses was the lousy sound system, and it permeates everything, my brothers and sisters. I mean, it permeates not only the liturgical experience for those that are present, but frankly, those that were watching online were equally impacted by that, right? And every parish has its own unique, our design of our beautiful, beautiful churches are not always necessarily acoustically proper, right? But they are beautiful in the traditional sense. But I was doing a homily at one parish where the priest warned me that there was only one spot in the solea that I could stand that wouldn't create unnecessary echoes. And I'm a wanderer. And so I wandered away from it. And all of a sudden he came out from the altar in the middle of my homily and literally guided me back into that spot. And it was a good, funny moment, but at the same time, how sad it was that was the only place they could be heard. So the technology and the facilities and the communications are kind of this integrated whole, even though they're kind of separate compartments in our assessment. Nick, I know this is something that you and Steve and others work on when you start to do with the capital campaigns and helping churches kind of build out, so to speak, what it is that they're doing. So what else would you like to add about the assessment that we're doing on the building block of facilities, technology, and communications?
Yeah, there are just so many parishes that, don't think the facilities are important to that overall experience or the overall engagement. And, again, it's just, it's helping parishes to think differently. We really need to think differently from all aspects, whether it's ministries or facilities or sound systems, and, encouraging, parishioners and stakeholders to invest time and energy, right? Our time, talents, and treasures in anything and everything that will make our parishes, more engaging for the overall experience.
So I think what you're starting to see is hopefully how we're looking at giving you the tool to assess the effectiveness in this particular area. Now, the third building block in operational effectiveness is one that we actually touched on a couple of times in part one, because it's one of these things that flows through multiple pillars. But this is a specialized focus that we have in this pillar on financial excellence. So, Steve, why don't you start us out by talking a little bit about the building block and what we're assessing in the building block of financial excellence?
Sure. And again, this goes right back to this notion of stewardship. That we will be the stewards of all the gifts that have been given to us, the financial gifts that have been given to us, in order to, pay the bills and enable ministries. But the first one is to have a sense of discipline and transparency. So we look at the monthly financial reports, and it can go from, do you have a financial system that is generating the reports? Are you using an outside bookkeeper? What processes and tools are you using to actually create an accurate financial report? Is there credibility with this? And again, full transparency. The next area is looking at audit committees. Audit committees can go anywhere from an internal committee to an external audit, although those are expensive because the CPAs typically will charge a great deal of money because they're putting their license on the line, to an external review, which is less costly than a full CPA audit, but still can provide some perspectives. And then there's different techniques of sharing, audits, having one audit team from one parish doing an audit from onto another parish and reverse that. But it's important that, the financial audits and the reviews are not taken lightly, that the recommendations that are provided are implemented, and then they're reported against as well. Using a professional bookkeeper, if at all possible, is something that we see in many parishes. They like that third party element of it to, again, provide some degree of comfort and within the parish.
Right.
Effectively managing cash flow is another one. This we saw very significantly at the early onset of the pandemic in spring of 2020, where parishes, had budgets in place. Of course, that would be another element. Do you have a budget in place? But the parishes that had budgets in place immediately responded to rewriting their budgets, being far more conservative. We just didn't know. Of course, what we found out in 2020 is that we actually probably eclipsed our original budget by people being very generous in supporting the parish. But are you constantly monitoring cash flow? And then there's the daily operational cash flow. There is the longer term maintenance. And then if you get into capital campaigns or whatever, there's that element as well.
Right.
Then you get into endowments and everything else. And then, the establishing positive banking relationships. If you have a positive banking relationship, if the bank notices something, if there's a mistake in a deposit or whatever the case might be, it's important that they know who to contact, that you don't have stale signature cards there, that everything is up to date. So it's really looking at all those different financial elements to make sure that, most importantly, we're reporting regularly and we're reporting in a very transparent manner.
Absolutely excellent. And I think that was very well stated in terms of its totality. And so you can hopefully start to see some of the different aspects that we're looking at that the data tells us is what is true of the most effective parishes. And if we can help you identify those areas where there are some challenges, then we can also help you get stronger. Mitch, any final observations that you would like to add in the area of financial excellence under the pillar of operational effectiveness?
Steve did a really good job of covering kind of the gambit. I'd make a couple of points. Financial excellence is kind of the foundations of trust. It's kind of, when we work with parishes that are not doing a good job in this area, it kind of impacts trust throughout the community. If the parish doesn't know what the financial numbers are, and I think the determiner for me is if I go into a parish and they can't explain to me what it costs to operate the parish, they don't have an appreciation for what it costs when they come on Sunday with the lights on and the heat on and everything's operating and we have everything we need to do the liturgy. The financial excellence is about managing that piece. And then the second piece I'd make on that is it's really easy to rely on a volunteer who may or may not have the skill set to manage the financial side.
Yeah.
And feel like, well, we're saving money. We're making someone feel engaged and allowing them to volunteer. But the level of financial knowledge needed is critical in our communities. And even among the leaders, understanding what coordinated financial statements are, understanding the difference between the type of expenditures. I think this is an area that every parish can grow on, and not just doing it right, but also understanding it and creating knowledge in their community about why our money is put here for savings, why we need you to tithe, and why we need to pay so much each month for this and that. Right. That would be what I'd add.
So I think what hopefully everybody is seeing is that the Effective Parish Assessment tool will give you greater insights. We started out part one of this by saying that doctors know the test to administer to determine your physical health, and financial planners know the test to administer your financial planning health. And this tool is really designed in the very tactical step here on operational effectiveness to actually give you the meaningful information that you need. Now, the fourth building block of this operational effectiveness pillar is one that, unfortunately, a lot of parishes don't think a lot about, and that's safety and security. And for the listeners tonight, I want you to know that I really wanted to cover this section, but I was overruled by all my colleagues in a unanimous vote. And I think it had something to do with the fact that I told them a story about how Georgia, here where I live, is both a concealed carry and an open carry state. And my priest, who is a former police officer before the Lord called him to work with a different group of sinners, announced one Sunday that everybody was welcome to carry concealed if they wanted to during the services, and they could guess if he was carrying concealed under his vestments. But he wanted all the bad guys out there to know his policy, just in the case they thought about targeting our church, so that the phrase active shooter would likely be plural. So you can understand why my colleagues over here refuse to allow me to address this building block of safety and security. So moving on to this very important topic, and is again something that we don't spend enough time on. Steve, this is something that I know you've really focused a lot of good diligent effort, particularly in the pre and post-COVID period. Why don't you start talking about this building block of safety and security, and how do we ensure the safety and security of the faithful and our visitors?
Sure. So first of all, from a safety and security, what happens, well, unfortunately, in our world, we see now through media every attack that goes on in any house of worship. And there has been a huge upswing, especially in the Catholic Church, with acts of vandalism and attacks, over 200 in the last 2 years. And it's just, unfortunately, kind of become a fact of life. But as Bill's point, most parishes don't address this. The parishes that are addressing this, for the most part, are parishes that have been around for many decades, 40, 50, 60, 100 years, and the demographics of their community has shifted. And so they feel uncomfortable for a variety of reasons, going to church, and certainly avoid church at night. So having a safety and security plan is really a vital element. But when we talk about safety and security, again, because of the media, we tend to go think about an active shooter. And unfortunately, that has happened. But the reality is, it's good basic emergency preparedness. You're probably more likely to have someone pass out in your church than you are to have an active shooter walk in.
Yeah, by a large order of magnitude, that's more likely. You're exactly right.
Yeah, because we have a very aged population. So what do you do if that happens? Do you have a wheelchair? Right. Do you have a gurney? One parish says, well, we have an oxygen bottle. You talk to any physician out there, they're going to say oxygen is a drug. Do not administer oxygen. But it can go all the way to other basics. One of the things I do from time to time is I'll walk up to an usher and say, do you know where the fire extinguisher is? You got a bunch of candles burning here. Do you know where the fire extinguisher is? Yeah, we probably have one around. Oh, has it been recharged recently? I don't know.
Don't know, yeah.
Or AED machines need batteries changed from. So it's all these different program elements. So if you look at putting together a safety and security, there's a quote here from Ryan Young. He's the executive assistant director of the FBI, and he just gave a presentation in March of 2022 to the Homeland Security. And he says, and I'm paraphrasing, not quoting, but houses of worship require robust protection efforts now, which starts with effective partnerships. And those effective partnerships are available free to every parish, and that starts with your local police department. Most police departments now, or at least a neighboring police department, has an anti-terrorism unit that they will come in, and they jointly with you will do an inspection of your property. They will identify areas that you are vulnerable and help you write a report and plan for your community. It's very important to work closely with your local police department. For heaven forbid, anything happens, they will need to know certain things. They would like to have a site map given to them, so they can access that in times of emergency. If you're an earthquake-prone area, as Southern California is, having evacuation drills. it's very far ranging. So if we looked at putting together an effective plan, it starts with this safety and security committee, because you probably have some parishioners that are interested and trained in this area. It's the training of ushers and greeters to know how to respond to emergency, what to do. If someone is faint, do you know who the doctors are in your community? Can you identify them? Getting, again, in that plan, input from local police and fire departments, doing a walk around your campus on a regular basis to see if it indeed is a safe campus. Do you have adequate lighting, et cetera, et cetera? And then is appropriate health and safety equipment readily available? Do you have those elements in place? So it's really multifaceted, but it starts with that committee of committed volunteers that see this as their ministry to provide a safe environment for parishioners.
That was very well done. And I think what you're hopefully seeing is that the totality of what we're looking at in this pillar of safety and security is critically important. Now, hopefully you never need it, but when you do need it, trust me, it is the most important thing. And so part of what this assessment tool is to help identify those areas where there may be weaknesses and there may be opportunities for improvement. Okay, we're almost done. We're going to finish quickly with the fifth building block of the pillar of operational effectiveness. And this should come as no surprise, but it's the staff management piece, because at the end of the day, with all the volunteers doing everything they possibly can, there are existing employees and paid staff within the church, and that's a critical, important function. So I'm gonna open this up to all three of you, and so we'll go in order of age, right? So I won't say no. Yeah, let's start with you, Steve, and then Mitch, and then Nick. Why don't you bring us home and give us some insights regarding this building block on staff management and operational effectiveness?
Well, it's kind of an offshoot of the volunteer management, but it's treating, and again, by definition, we're talking about paid staff. If not, then they become volunteer staff. Now, you might have a situation where you have not a W-2 employee, but you have a 1099 employee, and I would say treat that person just like paid staff. But look at the basics of what we all get, in our companies. Again, expectations, training, pay on time, paid fully on time, knowing where that employee can go if they want to talk to somebody. You probably do not have a human resource department. And again, most parishes have very small paid staffs,
right?
But some are a little bit larger. And what we are finding is that there's a tipping point where if you are doing.
Uh-oh, we hit the tipping point over there. You got to put another quarter in your cell phone over there, Tibbs. The pleasures of live radio here, folks, right? Technology sometimes doesn't work in our favor in this regard. So let's hope there's not a natural disaster going on in Southern California. So we'll pick up Steve when he comes back on. But in the meantime, Mitch, why don't you talk a little bit about something that you know a lot about, and that is this notion of staff management. Mitch, are you still with us? I know I can see you on the line here.
Yeah,
you need to unmute.
I'm with
you.
Okay. I think the way I would kind of bring this in a different kind of perspective is this is one of the areas that if we do not do it well, it can become a very dangerous, trust-destroying element within our community, because we often hire Orthodox Christians to work in our parishes. And so you're not only an employee, a staff member, but you're also a Christian worshiping there. And when things don't go well, because we didn't set the right expectations, we didn't manage our staff in the proper way, we can create splinters in the community and difficulty. And so it's not just, it's one of those things that we don't think about enough, because it's not really an issue until we do it poorly. And then it becomes very challenging. I also think there is a synergy that happens between staff and clergy.
Yes.
That has to work. And that really is done best if there is a system or a planning approach. And then I think there's also a synergy between the staff and the board or the council or the ministry leaders and the non-volunteers. And so it comes back to understanding the roles and responsibilities and managing it like we are a company, an organization that has to manage our human resources just as much as we have to manage our technology, our communication, our facilities, et cetera.
Right. And I think that's an important, the multiple dimensions of staff management and staff interactions is something that we oftentimes don't step back and look at it systematically. And that's what this Effective Parish Assessment is trying to do for you, is trying to help give you some kind of a systematic assessment of that. Now, Steve, I think you're back online, right? Did we pick you back up? Okay, you West Coasters over here, man. I'm starting to worry about you guys. Hope you don't have a fire going on or something.
I'm out of change, so I got that.
Oh, okay. Is that what it is?
I would echo what Mitch said in terms of the staff management. And there's usually a conversation about, do we hire somebody from the parish to be the parish secretary? Right. And some parishes say absolutely no, we want somebody from the outside, because we need the flexibility to manage them up to and including terminating them if need be. So it's tough to do with a parishioner. So that's always usually the first hurdle that has to be decided when you're deciding to hire somebody.
Yeah. No, that is a tricky phenomenon, and it applies in a lot of different contexts too. I mean, even if it's the caretaker or something of that nature, right? Or I mean, we had a situation where one of the parishioners was doing the snow removal and the grass cutting, and then now what do you do when that hasn't? So this is an important element. All right, Nick, bring us home, brother. I don't want to put too much pressure on you to bring us home, but this has been a great in-depth assessment of three critical pillars and building blocks. But in the area of staff management, with your great experience having managed nonprofit staffs and Orthodox Christian staffs, what final comments would you add that we're looking at in this Effective Parish Assessment?
Well, I mean, it's staff management is one thing in all the numerous things that we've talked about, and we really have talked about a lot of things tonight, and then on the previous program as well. In all, we've talked about 30 building blocks that make an effective parish. But all these aspects of parish vitality, we have to understand that they are not overly complex. I mean, this isn't rocket science, right? These are relatively simple things that we can do, but just like any aspect of life, we could all use a little bit of help in identifying and working through some of these aspects. In any aspect of life, it's great to have a mentor or a coach who walks alongside us and helps us to learn and to get better. And that's what OMS has done with hundreds of parishes and organizations. And that's exactly what the EPA, or the Effective Parish Assessment, does. It walks alongside parishes to help them learn and to get better in just rudimentary tasks that really help a parish build vitality and vibrancy. And when we build vitality and vibrancy, we can and we will create an environment where parishioners are fully engaged Christians who champion the mission of a parish. And when we champion the mission of a parish, we are going to bring more people into Christ and his salvation. And that is why we are here.
Well, my brother, I couldn't have put it any better over there. So I'm glad we went to a preacher's son here to kind of bring us home, because you did a beautiful job of kind of summing up everything. So my brothers and sisters, if you stand back and look at all of part one and all of part two, and I know it's a lot of content, what we hope you come away from it understanding is that after exhaustively looking at well over 500 Orthodox parishes and all the research we could find, we at Orthodox Ministry Services have done the hard work of identifying 30 very critical building blocks that you can optimize to excellence to do exactly what Nick said, to get rid of all of the noise and all the hassles and all the things that are impediments to bringing people closer to Christ. And through the Effective Parish Assessment tool, we are offering you the opportunity to assess where those areas are along a spectrum and what areas are most critical that you can work on. What are the next most critical? What are the next most critical? And so that you actually have a perfectly clear diagnostic and then hopefully an eventual remediation plan. So remember, now that we're coming to the end here, you can go to effectiveparish.org. That's effectiveparish.org. And you can sign up to be in the list so that once we finish the global delivery platform that we're in the process of finalizing, we will alert you to it so that you can then participate and take advantage of this free comprehensive resource. And if you're one of the GOA parishes that's willing to go a little bit further and invest a little bit more effort and energy to participate in the Leadership 100 program that we've set up, and you want to be one of the 18 to 20 cohort parishes that we're going to be working with over the next year and a lot more closer, then you want to go to the second page, which is the GOA EPAP page, and you can sign up and register there. So, as always, I want to give a huge shout out and thanks to my OMS colleagues, the amigos, Steve Tibbs, Dr. Mitch Owen, Nick Chakos, as well as our Effective Parish Assessment collaborator, Dr. Scott Mondor, and the very talented Louis Lambrew that helps us with the materials and the website. And I hope that we have instilled in you a greater, deeper understanding of how you can look at your parish and optimize to excellence the things that are most critical. I always have to give thanks to Matushka Trudy Richter, who is tirelessly working behind the scenes at the little studio in Chesterton, Indiana, and dealing with coordinating all of these activities. I'm working on what I was hoping to be a major announcement tonight of a national, actually even an international special guest for the September First Wednesday Stewardship Calling program, but we're still trying to coordinate his travel schedule. So stay tuned, and I'll let you know more about that. But this is one of the most significant legal and geopolitical players in the orthosphere that really can bring forth a lot of knowledge of what's going on. If you find these Stewardship Calling First Wednesday and Fifth Sunday shows to be helpful and informative, please tell your friends, and you can always listen to the archive versions. Remember, part 1 is already up as an archive version with the July 31st, 2022 date. And in a day or two, as soon as Matushka finishes producing this, we'll have this one up right behind it. You can find it either by going to stewardshipcalling.com and the Internet Radio tab and just scroll down to the dates, or if you're more comfortable going to the Ancient Faith Radio page and find the Stewardship Calling subpage, and again, scroll down to July 31st and August 3rd, 2022. And you're welcome to check out any of the other resources, as I said, either on my website, stewardshipcalling.com, or eventually as we continue to build out the Effective Parish site with the solutions and the videos and the other things that is part of our plan to make available to you. If you have any questions or you want to do any follow-up, again, sign up to the effectiveparish.org site. But if you want to reach me, you can reach me at bill@stewardshipcalling.com. And as always, I ask you to remember the 2 of the most important days of your life are: first, the day you were born, and second, the day you figure out why. And if you're not already living your stewardship calling, I hope that you'll prayerfully discern your why and stewardship calling and start living the most extraordinary second half of your life. And through use of the tools of the Effective Parish Assessment and other things we're offering at Orthodox Ministry Services, we want to help you help your parish be the strongest, most effective, and healthy parish to bring people closer to Christ and each other. So I thank you for listening. I ask to God to bless all of you. And as always, I pray that you SOTPAETJ, which stands for stay on the path, capital T, capital P, and enjoy the journey. God bless and good night.